What is going on, big ballers? Welcome to round 2 of the playoffs. We got some injuries to cover. We got some news to go over regarding people that are not going to come back this season. But before we get into all that, let's have a quick word from our sponsor.
Hey there, my name is Manny James Gonzalez with PRB, and I'm a real estate agent here in Central Florida. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, military relocation pro, and big supporter of 2A and veterans' rights. My specialty is VA transactions. I'm also experienced in all parts of real estate.
I've been living in Florida for over 20 years, and I can tell you we still believe in freedom down here. One of the greatest job markets, excellent economy, and no state income tax. When it comes to an agent, you want one that's going to be honest, not afraid of a fight, and most importantly, willing to do the things that some agents aren't willing to do.
And what's that, Manny?
Shoot straight, Dan. If you're ever considering buying in Central Florida, you need somebody you can trust, and I got your 6. I'm Manny James Gonzalez, find land for the free and home for the brave.
Welcome back, ballers. Now let's get into some news and notes. Unfortunately, the injury apocalypse has returned, and there's a few things that we have to discuss right off the bat. There's 3 players that are out for the rest of the season. That is running back David Montgomery. He has been amazing all season. It sucks he's not coming back. Obviously, he's going to be high on the draft charts next year, but he's not coming back this year. Sincere McCormick, who just recently came into the news, is out for the rest of the season. And unfortunately, Nick Chubb came back, hurt his foot, also out for the rest of the season. Now, we got to get into a few people that did not practice today, and there are a lot of people that we got to keep our eye on going into Week 16. At running back, the following did not practice today: Tony Pollard, Isaac Guerrero, Breece Hall, and Jaleel McLaughlin. McLaughlin? I don't know. At wide receiver, we got a lot of people. Did not practice today: DK Metcalf, Sterling Shepard, Devonta Smith, Xavier Legette, Devonta, whatever. Xavier Legette, George Pickens, Michael Pittman Jr., and Alex Pierce from the Colts, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, I always say that wrong, and Tyler Boyd, both from the Titans, and Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, both from the Dolphins. Keep an eye on all those guys going into this weekend. Make sure you have made arrangements. A lot of those guys are starters, so make sure you've made arrangements if they're not going to play. Now, tight end, Cade Otton, David Njoku, and Zach Ertz. Those are 3 high-level tight ends. They're all rostered, so if you do have them on your team, make arrangements. Pick up a tight end like Brendan Strange or Smart, and put them on your bench just in case. Just have a plan. Now, at quarterback, the only person that did not practice is Baker Mayfield. Obviously, he's a high-level quarterback. He's been great for me. I have him in 2 leagues. I got knocked out of 1 league, out of the playoffs, because I started Brock Purdy over Baker. But Baker's been unbelievable. Looked great last week. Did not practice today. Could just be resting, but keep an eye on that. Now let's get into our hot matchups for today. My first hot matchup is the Eagles versus the Commanders. These two met in Week 11, and the Eagles won that game 26-18. And although it wasn't a high-scoring game, it was competitive, and I expect this to be a close game too. Austin Eckler and Dallas Goedert are on IR, and Noah Brown, but the rest of the offense is healthy for both teams. Now I want to go over what happened last game. Barkley was an absolute monster. He had almost 34 points, but A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith had really lackluster performances. And Terry McLaurin had the worst game of the season with only 2 fantasy points in Week 11. All those guys over the last few weeks, as we know, have been playing incredible. So expect a huge bounce back for all 3 of them. I mean, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Terry McLaurin, if you have them on your team, the chances are you're going to play them. And in Week 11, Jaden Daniels only had 13 points, 13.5, and Jalen Hurts only had 18.7. So when you look at those guys and what they do every week, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels, and Jalen Hurts, they had really down weeks in Week 11. With these two teams and their high-powered offenses and what we've seen them do all year, expect a huge game. I do not see anything close to what happened in Week 11 happening again this time around. Now, in Week 11, Brian Robinson and Zach Ertz, they both scored touchdowns, and they should be good starts this week as well. But as I mentioned earlier, Ertz is questionable, so keep an eye on him. He's in concussion protocol. If he's not playing, make arrangements. But long story short, we've seen what these two teams can do, even against great defenses. And I expect the offense to show up in a big way this time around. Now, to get into my honorable mention, I have the Rams versus the Jets. The recent stats are all over the place with both of these teams, but I have a feeling this is going to be a serious bounce-back week for the Rams and continued momentum for the Jets. Stafford and his wide receiver weapons, along with Kyren Williams, are going to be playing hard to secure a playoff seed. Last week is impossible to understand. The matchup seemed primed for a shootout. I had it as one of my hot matchups, but it was one of the worst games all season and not a single touchdown was scored from either team. The Jets' D has fallen apart over the second half of the season, so expect the Rams to deliver. And Aaron Rodgers and the Jets appear to be having fun now. They have no chance at the playoffs, but they looked awesome last week. I know it was against the Jaguars, but it was fun to watch. Rodgers had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Devontae Adams had 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson had a touchdown. Breece Hall wasn't great, but he bailed you out with a touchdown. And if he's healthy, he's obviously in your lineup. He didn't practice today. Again, keep an eye on him. Make arrangements. The Jets backfield, it's hard to navigate without Breece Hall. So I'm not sure what to tell you to do there. Hopefully you have somebody else you can plug in. Now let's get into my cold call. For my cold call this week, I have the Titans versus the Colts. Watching the Titans last week was absolutely brutal. Will Levis is getting benched for Rudolph, which is probably a good move, but I mean, whatever. Tony Pollard could have a big day against the Colts' weak run defense, but he's banged up and may not play. As I mentioned earlier, he didn't practice today. Tyjae Spears is probably a good flex play if that's the case, but keep an eye on that situation. Ridley, of course, boom bust, and you should have better options if you're in the second round of the playoffs. Westbrook-Ikhine came back down to earth over the last 2 weeks, and he's banged up too, so he's probably not going to be in your lineup. And the only player I would consider starting is Pollard, or if he's out, Tyjae Spears. Now with the Colts, you have the always unpredictable Anthony Richardson, the extremely disappointing Jonathan Taylor, and the perpetually banged up group of wide receivers. If you've gotten this far, you're probably not relying on any of those players this week. So I just don't see that being a high-scoring game. I see it being a very ugly game with very minimal offense and just a slop fest across the field. I'm staying far away from it. I am playing the Colts D in one league, but altogether with those offenses, I don't want to touch it. Now let's get into my shit call of the week. I expected Kirk Cousins to save the Falcons and finish as a top 15 quarterback. He had all the weapons at his disposal, but it just didn't happen. He only had a couple good games over the entire season. So I did pick him up in one league. Luckily, I traded and got Jared Goff, and about week 6 decided to completely disregard Kirk Cousins. Of course, he had that one monster week where I missed out, but altogether, I was expecting big things from Kirk Cousins. If you remember last year, he was on fire until he was the quarterback 1 until he got injured. But he's slow out there. He does not look like the same player as we saw last year, even though it was a small sample size. And I think he's going to need some more time to heal, or it could just be that his days as a top-level fantasy quarterback are over. Well, that's going to do it for this quick episode of Sports Minds. Again, we might have one more wrap-up episode just to go over the season, but, probably not going to be tuning into much from here on out. If you're in the playoffs, good luck to you. You got 2 more weeks, unless you're in one of those leagues that goes to 18 weeks. Wish you all the best. Thank you for all the support this year, and we'll see you guys soon.